Same
There
here.
we go.
Hello, welcome to Enlightened Empaths with Samantha and Denise. We're so happy that you guys are joining us again for our second episode of our brand new podcast, where we're going to reach out and help connect like minded people to start exploring their intuition and understanding the power of their own empathy. So, last week we kind of just talked about what empathy is and sort of who we are and how we met and our goals for the show. And I thought this week what we could do is a little bit of a getting to know you. So I thought that I would start off by interviewing Denise. I hate to call it an interview, right, Denise? But just kind of letting people know who you are.
That sounds wonderful.
So I have a lot of questions that I want to ask you that I don't know myself. So this isn't like a planned interview. I don't have, a bunch of questions written down. I just want it to flow like a conversation. But from what I know about you, I feel that you were raised in a fairly supportive environment when it came to psychic things. Like, wasn't your dad pretty psychic?
Yes, my father, incredible psychic and medium, very clairaudient, never used those words, but he would always say, you really need to listen to that little voice. Listen to that little voice, it'll never steer you wrong. Also, highly sensitive to spirit. And, when you grow up as that being a norm, it just, you don't realize that isn't everybody's normal. But then, of course, also was brought up Catholic, so that's kind of counterintuitive if you think about it, no pun intended, that it's, so I'm growing up in a home with the, yes, it's normal to sense spirit. Yes, it's normal to know that death is coming. Yes, it's, to have someone standing in your room. But with that, there was also how can I say this? I want this to come out the right way. I never saw myself as in his league, and I don't think anyone else in the family did either, because it was just so he was that good and just a regular person. He wasn't a practicing medium, or he went to work every day. Just a really nice man, good father. So I think that's so many of us do grow up with that, but then we can't acclimate to what's going on in the so-called real world.
So, how did you might not be able to answer this because it's probably just something you grew up with, but do you recall a time when you realized your dad was different and that he was psychic?
I didn't until I was much older, because I think one of the other things I inherited from my father is he was very private, very family oriented, but he didn't. I mean, people who knew him wouldn't have known that he was that sensitive. And if you think if today would have been his birthday, he'd be 85 years old. If you go back to that generation, that wouldn't be something men would probably talk about a whole lot unless they were involved in a spiritualist church or in that community. So I
What
would say, oh, well, I'm sorry, go
what
ahead.
kinds of things did he do, that made you how did he use his psychic and mediumship ability around the home?
Oh my, he was incredibly good at sensing other people. So realistically, now when you look back at it, he was an empath because he was very good at gauging people's emotions. He was very good at, and one of the things I remember being a little tiny girl and we were riding downtown and he drove a pickup truck and I was riding in the truck and he pulled over and he said, "Watch this person come in, Denise." And I said, "Okay." So we're watching this person walk up the sidewalk and he said, "What can you tell me about that person?" And I said, "I don't know." And he said, "No. What do you feel from them?" And I said, "Well, they make me a little nervous." And so he would do those little things, or he would say, "Did you feel that? Did you sense that?" And it was in his own way, making it very normal. And my siblings aren't as sensitive, so and I was right in the middle. So I think on some level he knew that I was the one who had inherited that genetic link.
Did you exhibit signs yourself early on that you were intuitive? Like, did you see spirits?
I did when I was very, very young, and I remember telling it was Easter when I saw this, and I told my mother, and she said, "No, you didn't see anything." And I said, I did, I really saw." And I described the white, the whole thing. "You didn't see a damn thing. Now you need to stop it." And it's like, okay. So so that was, that mixed messages of, one parent saying, "This is normal, this is what you do, be aware of it," and another saying, you just need to be quiet because you don't know what you're talking about.
Wow. Yeah, and when we get those mixed messages, that can shut us down.
Right, and I was also brutally, brutally shy, like painfully shy for a very large part of my life. So, and I think that that's a huge part for a lot of, and why I have such empathy for kids, because they're just so wide open.
Yeah, and I think being very, very shy as a child is another common trait that many empaths share.
Yes, I agree.
Because, we're so I think it's because we do feel so very much. So you were raised Catholic. I always feel like when we're raised in a religious home, it's usually one parent who's pushing that. Would you say that was your mom or your dad?
Well, my mother was brought up very Catholic, parochial school. My grandmother, went to the whole thing, very Catholic. So when my parents got married, my father was a Protestant, so they couldn't get married inside the altar, and that was a huge, huge deal back in the 50s to marry outside of your religion. So my father was, he would say, "I don't need to go to church because I know that I can be connected anywhere." Whereas my mother, we'd go to mass, and I think, and that was often a bone of contention between the two. And after the family stopped going to church, I continued going by myself for, oh my gosh, I think I was well into my 30s when I stopped going to mass.
That's so I did that too. I was raised Catholic and we stopped going I think when I was in middle school, and as soon as I got my driver's license, I would go by myself. There's
And
just
it's beautiful.
Go ahead.
And it's beautiful in the ritual and the routine, and my own personal aside on that is any church or house of worship holds amazing, amazing energy. And if you're sensitive or empathic, it is just such an incredibly safe place, safe and peaceful place to be.
Yeah, you can feel that peaceful energy just wash over you. It's so true. So you were shy like all through elementary, middle, and high school, or just like how long were you shy? Most of your childhood?
I was shy to the point when I left for college. I was still, like if someone called me, I'd turn beet red and stammer. My hands would sweat. My voice would crack. Incredibly, incredibly uncomfortable. So, and I think, and I did. I took read this book on shyness, and I went to a thing at the the counseling center. They had this small group, and it was different. It was also the first time I'd been away from home. I was first generation college, so it was a very unique experience because I left the state. I was alone. I didn't know a soul, and it's like, oh my gosh, what have I done?
Did you find freedom in that, though? I think sometimes there's such a freedom for shy people when they're allowed to escape that role of being the shy one.
Well, and that was the anonymity, because before, I think I was a junior in high school, I lost a lot of weight. I lost a whole lot of weight. I was very heavy set, lost a weight. So when I went away to school, no one had ever known me as heavy. They only knew me as what I presented when I got there, which was thin and tall and, the whole thing. But my mindset hadn't adjusted to being that person yet. So that was a real mixed message for me on the internal level of why are people, especially males, why am I getting, it's Grace. Why am I getting attention now when before there wasn't because of my weight? So it's that very strange piece.
Yeah, because then you wonder, why do people actually like you?
Right. Is it me, or is it because, I'm attractive, or because it's, the outside, the shell? And I think that's what I love about now is, as more and more people become sensitive and awakened, or whatever label we want to put on it, we're starting to see each other's true self, and also starting to have the strength and the confidence to come from our true inner knowing and speak our truth.
I agree. Now, I have this theory that everybody who is into this intuitive stuff that we're into, that there are little signs and markers throughout your childhood beyond just seeing or sensing spirits. I think you can see the signs in the type of music and TV and books that you are interested in reading. Did you find that you were always attracted to reading about spirituality or ghosts or witches or watching Scooby-Doo or,
All of the above. Very much all of the above. It was, I loved to go to the public library, and I grew up in like a small city, so it had a nice public library, and I would just go to that section and devour all of those books, because that was pre-internet and there were so many, and it just opened up this whole world. I think I was 17 when I first bought my first tarot deck, because I just felt drawn. I just was so, and chakras and colors, and I just loved everything about it. I would say from about 12 or 13, I just loved everything about the spirituality piece.
So that was there early on, but I'll bet you weren't sitting around at 12 or 13 going, "Daddy, when I grow up, I'm going to be a psychic."
No, not at all. No, I grew up working class. I, worked every summer. I started working when I was 11. I did, I used to work, they had a program for low-income youth back in when I was a kid, that I was working in a state institution when I was 14 years old for a summer program. So I've always been, that old, very grounded, very practical, very down to earth. And the other has always just been part of who I am, which I hid for a long, long time because I didn't want to be ridiculed.
Wait, what did you do at 11?
I was babysitting.
Wow.
And then at like 12, I started working on my father's lobster boat. Yeah, so I've been busy.
Yeah. So you had like a decade off your whole life.
Oh, I never thought. Oh, I don't want to think about it like that. We're progressing. Yes.
Wow. Okay, so you go to college. It's scary at first, but you're coming into yourself. You're feeling attractive and a little freaked out about it, but I'm sure it's exciting. You're coming out of your shell. Kind of walk us through those years where you didn't have all of the other stuff. Go ahead.
But that's the typical college experience, just add alcohol. And of course, for someone who hadn't had a lot of experience with that, I would start to tell people what I was seeing and sensing and who their dead people were. And it was not, it was very uncomfortable because people weren't ready to hear it. And I put myself out there it was a very vulnerable place to be. And of course, I have two dear friends who know me from that time in my life, and they've always known that side of me, but most people haven't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when you drank alcohol, did it lower the inhibitions so you could share the information, or did it lower the inhibition so you could sense the information?
So I could share the information.
Okay.
Because now if I'm involved with doing any kind of readings, I would never drink. I just want the clarity.
We don't recommend drinking and reading.
No, and on the other side of that, it's really hard to do readings for people who have been drinking. Like when I've gone to do big groups and it's like, oh, here we go. So yes, it's been, but yes, you lower your inhibitions, and then all this stuff blurts out, and then you say, oh, what have I said? But when I moved back to Maine after being gone for many years, I ran into this woman who I had known from that time in my life because I had been gone for for many, many years. And she asked a good friend of mine, she said, "So, does Denise still see dead people?"
Oh, wow. Do you remember, do you have any stories of like any good hits, as we call it, like any good information you got through to people during that time that surprised you?
Yes, and what was really, really cool is where I live in Maine, north of here, Aquasic, which is in western Maine up in the mountains, there was a community of psychics. So there used to be this very famous psychic in the area and also on the East Coast, Kay Mora, and she was between here and Casadega down in Florida. And she used to come down to the university and do these little workshops and psychic awareness and do readings. And she brought this young man with her who was from Mexico City. He and his mother were up in the community in Aquasic. And I became very, very dear friends with Luis. And we would, and he was the one who really, really, he looked at me one day and he said, "You know you're a psychic, right?" And I said, "No, I'm not a psychic." He said, "No, you're a psychic." And we would just, and it was so fun because he pushed me to my limits and helped me to see. And that's not really a good hit, but it's that whole thing of people show up in your life as a catalyst.
Yes.
To help you see your own inner, that yes, you are that sensitive. Yes, you do know what you're talking about. And that was a huge gift for me because, navigating being alone, being away from home, being all of a sudden wide open, and then to have someone pop up that understood what it was like to function. But he was so cute because he would say things like, "Oh, I don't need to study. I'll just put the book under my pillow." And I said, that's not going to work, sweetie.
Yeah, that worked for Edgar Casey, but not the rest of us schmucks. Oh, that's funny. But how nice for you to have somebody say, "I see you."
Yes, exactly. And I think that's where we are right now is more and more of us are seeing each other and it's like dear friends reconnecting because we
Yes,
understand each other.
that recognition. So in college, what did you major in?
Emotional disturbance and special ed.
Oh wow, I knew you were special ed, but I didn't know the emotional disturbance.
Right.
That's intense. What drew you to that?
Back, two things. Back when I was working in the state institutions, and so special ed was really big at that time. I always wanted to be a teacher. I knew from when I was a little tiny girl I wanted to be a teacher, and special ed. And also, I have a younger brother who had some who was in special services, and it was an absolute nightmare for him. Absolutely horrific situation, and I watched what it did for him, what it did to him, and also the familial effect of having a person in the family who needs, extra educational assistance, and that's huge. And I think now we're seeing another wave of that with so many kids who are being diagnosed with autism and Asperger's, and it's another whole. Every generation seems to have a code label that their ADHD was big for a while, hyperactive was big for a while, OCD was big for a while, and right now the code is on autism and Asperger's. So yes, that's why I ended up in that field.
Wow. Okay, and did you get your master's?
I do. I have a master's in educational leadership, so administration, and I've been teaching special ed all the years that I've been in education. I've taught from pre-K to community college level. Right now I'm doing an employability skills program and teaching school to work program. So
Okay, so then you leave college, you get your job, you're doing what you want to be doing, you get married, you have children. Kind of walk us through those years as being an empath and an intuitive.
yes, I was teaching. I met my ex-husband. We traveled all over the country. We lived in 7 different states. My older son was born on the West Coast. My younger son was born on the East Coast.
Wow, hold on. I'm curious, was that a choice to move or was that getting the best job?
It was doing geographicals, and if anyone has any, my ex-husband made a lot of choices, and I don't know how far I want to go into that, but I have another master's degree in codependence. I'm very, very good at it. So there were a lot of geographicals done too. The better job. It'll be better when we move here, and it's all that typical
Sure.
stuff that we do.
But that's a lot on newlyweds and a young mom. That's 7 states. That's a lot. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. So you're
Oh no. So we lived all over the country, and the other thing was that, and no disrespect, because he's an incredibly intelligent man, and I did love him very much when I married him. So I always like to preface with that. But he's also an incredibly he's the poster child of who we attract as empaths. Very narcissistic, very controlling. A lot of covert emotional abuse, demeaning as far as you don't know what you're talking about, you don't, you're making that shit up in your head, all of that kind of stuff. And so I went underground, and I, just became the closet psychic even in my own home.
And that's really hard, because I think the hardest thing to do with this empath road is just admitting to yourself that the stuff you're feeling is real, and to have the one person you've chosen to share your life with and to create life with doubt you and tell you you're wrong. I mean, that would shut anybody down.
Right. And that is, that's huge. And that's so, because it's so debilitating and limiting.
So how did you find the strength, because I feel like you had to find the strength to leave him and kind of start anew as a single mom with your boys, and then you had to find the strength again to go, no, you know what, I think he was wrong. I think I do have something here. So I'm not asking you to tell us the nitty-gritty of
No. But
that time.
But that was very, very much of, and I remember, and I'll just give you the brief abridged version, and I still have the page around the house somewhere, is I remember that there was a situation, and I went over and I took a red marker and I wrote on a calendar, "Game over," and I circled it in red marker. And I realized that I had to provide a more stable situation for the boys, where that they could see everyone deserves to be treated with respect and dignity. And that involved moving. We moved from Washington State to Maine. It was myself and my 2 small sons, a dog and a cat, in an old van, and we moved and we relocated. I had secured a job while we were on the West Coast. I did phone interviews, and came back with the intention that my ex-husband would come along in a few months. So we were still married at that time. So that's, and when I think for a lot.
So you drove across the country with young boys and a dog and a cat. I mean, that must have been terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. So you kind of just start over, you're back on the East Coast, and then you guys divorce. And were you just so busy during those years focusing on, just raising your kids and, paying the mortgage? Or were you able to work on yourself and your intuition some?
That would be during those years. That would be what I read, what I was interested in. But yes, as a single mother with 2 boys and working full time, there wasn't a lot of luxury to do the things which I am incredibly grateful for now. And I do that. If I can sit down and just, I call it playing juju, just doing things that I want to do. But during that time, I read the books. Once the internet the internet was up at that point, and I would find things online and I'd watch them, and I'd listen to Hay House Radio when that became prevalent, and all the little things you do trying to make that connection with other people who understand what it's like to be the way we're wired. Because I
bet we were listening to Hay House Radio at the same time, Denise.
I was right at the beginning of it, and I don't know how many years ago that started, but I was so excited. So
I think it was around 2000.
right, and so we moved here in 2001. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
about right.
I used to listen to it in my little office area with my headphones and my computer on, and I would take notes.
Me too. And then I would just pile up the notes and not go back to them. But
Yeah, me too. Me too.
But I was so excited that people were talking about what I love.
Oh, I know. It was like Christmas every day. I always tell the story about how when I used to go to the bookstore, the New Age section was called the occult section.
Yes.
And it was always like where I was living, it was next to the gay and lesbian section. And so it was like, so everybody was prejudiced at that time, it felt like, against, homosexuality. And then I felt like everyone was prejudiced against us New Agers. And so we'd all be hiding back there like, hi, how are you doing? And we'd look for our books and go on. Now it's so, accepted, all of that, which is so wonderful.
Yeah, thank God.
I know.
Just incredibly grateful that we're starting to wake up in that direction as well.
What were some of your, I have to ask you about books. What were some of your favorite books that you really connected with and learned from when you were starting out?
Well, that was when the big, Sylvia Browne was huge. Remember when she was she was everything, and everyone was talking about Sylvia Browne.
Sure, she was on Montel every Wednesday at 4. I still remember that.
Yes. Yes, so there was Sylvia. There was also, I grew up just in the area of Salem, Massachusetts. So there was Laurie Cabot, the witches, all of that occult business.
Wait, you lived near Salem?
Yeah, I grew up north of there.
I lived in Duxbury.
Yeah, I grew up in Gloucester, right? Just north of Salem.
Oh my goodness, isn't that something? I used to beg my father to take me to Salem as much as possible. I moved from there when I was 8, and I still remember it.
It's a beautiful, beautiful city.
It really is.
So, and then of course, what else? I'm trying to think, because that's so long ago now. But all the psychic development books, or the palm reading books, or anything that had anything at all to do with being psychic, being intuitive, being a medium. And I can't think of the specific names of the books right now, but I know that I read everything in that section of the library. And I'd go back and I'd get so excited.
Did you find that being a mother heightened your intuition, or that just the normal worry from being a mom did not heighten it? How did you feel that impacted it?
I think that it did heighten it. It also is that double-edged sword that a lot of times I can't read the people that are closest to me as far as picking up on their stuff. And I think that that's a safety valve for all of us, is that we're not meant to. It's the free will clause. It's also, I think it would interfere. Do I get hits about my kids? Very much so. But not, there's still that privacy piece. There's still, it's hard to explain. Do you find that with your girls?
You just cut out on me. Could you say that again?
Oh, I asked if you find that with your girls.
Yes, definitely. I can often get hits on them, but in terms of specifics, about even tuning into their spirit guides is really hard for me.
It's almost like there's a buffer zone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which I don't understand, but I get that it's for protection, but it is kind of frustrating. Right. So did you how did you start to awaken this gift again, or do you think it was always awakened in you?
Oh, I think it was always awakened. I think that it was I chose to embrace it more. I chose to tell more people. And again, very serendipitous as far as an old friend from when I was in this area before, many, many years ago, was having a get-together and said, I want you to come and do readings. And I said, no, I'm not. And she said, no, you are, and I want it to be you. And I said, I'm not doing that. And it was, and I did, of course, because I loved her dearly. She was a good friend. And I did some readings. I was like, oh, that's great. But it was all of a sudden, probably not even until about 5 years ago that I really threw the doors open and said, this is who I am. And so that's another reason I get so excited when I see younger people embracing this. They're going to have all of those years of their life to live in that space. And I think that is absolutely fantastic.
I do too. I don't know if you can get closer to your microphone or not, but you keep cutting out and it's kind of fuzzy.
Okay, well we just had the rain just started again, so I don't know.
Yeah, we've had nonstop rain here too. So, did you ever because I think there's a difference between calling yourself an intuitive and calling yourself a medium.
Oh, without a doubt.
So when did you start to embrace that terminology?
The psychic piece I was always more comfortable with than the medium piece, which is weird because usually it's the other way around. But that kind of goes along with the tarot cards and the hunches and the premonitions and the dreams, and that was what I felt more confident in. And then truly when the doors really opened for the mediumship, I would say about 10 years ago, really opened wide. I could always sense people around, I could sense spirit, but as far as doing the work and being able to connect and get evidential and really know who I was communicating with, I would say 10 years ago.
And what did you do at that point? Did you tell your family? Did you have
No.
I'm sure your father was like, yay, but how did you come out of the closet?
No, my father passed unexpectedly 26 years ago. So he died a very young man. So once he passed, once he passed, he was, that liaison was gone. And it changed the dynamics of the whole family. And honestly, this is going to sound really bizarre to people, but I never was really open with my mother about it until just before she passed, because there was a lot of ridicule and judgment about it. So,
sure. And probably some fear on her part with the,
right,
with her staunch beliefs.
But even it was more, and no disrespect to my mother because I do love her dearly, it was more you could never be as good as your father. It was, you don't know what it was similar to the messages I got from my ex-husband. You're making that up. You don't know what you're talking about. But the funny part of it was she loved that stuff. She loved mediums, she loved psychics, she loved the whole thing. So it was, again, I don't want to keep saying
so it was more about your dad being, that was his role.
Right.
Interesting.
So it's funny because when I told her was when I had gone to the first John Holland workshop in southern Maine, and she lived, not that far, so I went down to visit, and I told her where I had been, and she looked at me, she just kind of looked so dumbfounded. Like, you were where? Doing what? And I think I do sense her around a lot. She passed 4 years ago now, so I do sense her a lot, and I've done a lot of work around that, so it's good. So.
Did your dad come to you soon after he passed? I know that's a long time ago now, but I always wonder if mediums have an easier time coming through.
Yes, he's very strong, and and it's funny because he'll show up at times, and then I don't see him for a while. But he has, if something's going on with one of my boys, it's like I can feel him so strongly. But yes, after he and this is like a weird kind of a woo-woo story, is because my older son was 4 months old when my father passed, and so we were getting ready to come home to see them, and my father passed 2 weeks before we got here. But probably a month before that, we lived way out in the woods in Oregon, dark, beautiful, right on the edge of the mountains, and terrible storm, pitch black, and I had this little baby wrapped up, and I was trying to walk down this path in the woods to get to the house, and I know that somehow he lit the way for us to get down there, because and at that time, this is going to, because I think that we're able to be in two places, but that's a story for another day. But I sensed death incredibly strong. And I thought death was coming for the baby. Because you know how that fear when you have a new child, that horrible, and anyone who has had a child has lived through that, when you have a new baby and you're so afraid something's going to happen. So anyway, when I sensed death, so I reversed the story, I'm sorry, because my father hadn't passed at that point, and I thought death was coming for my son, but in actuality, I was sensing it ahead of time that he was coming for my father. And I don't know if you've ever actually sensed death as an entity. It's a very powerful, unmistakable spirit.
That's interesting. No, I've never even thought about it as an entity, which is weird because we always have the Grim Reaper, or which archangel is it? Azrael?
And it's incredible. It's a very, you know how when we're doing the mediumship and we connect and we know that it's a short, full, cheery, round woman and we pick up all this evidential stuff, but we know we have a unique person. Death has a unique, that nothing else feels like that.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's really interesting. Okay, so you sensed that. Wow. All right. Yeah. So how about the rest of your family? Like your two other siblings? Were they like, oh, that's just Denise, or hey, that's really cool. Tell me more about it.
I have an older sibling who is, if you can take everything and go in the opposite direction. We're very, no, I'm not exaggerating. Her outlook is dead, there is nothing, you're full of shit. And it's like, okay, like, no, like, it's nothing. Very angry woman, and I'm no disrespect again, she's just wired differently, and I'm sure, but no, she doesn't embrace this at all. And my younger sibling, I think, would love to and does some, but not in the same. My brother doesn't as much, and he would love to be like my father more. So
is your sister an atheist?
I wouldn't say she's an atheist, but this was because when I was really, I mean, of course, when I would go home, I would talk about the New Age stuff and all of this, and she would just think I was a loon, pretty much. So I think after my father passed and my mother passed, she started to realize that there's more.
Don't you find that so frustrating? Like, for me, I try not to think of myself as like egotistical or vain or caring a whole lot what other people think, but of course I do. But like, if you don't think I'm attractive, or if you don't like the way I dress, or if you don't like my opinions or beliefs, that's fine. But when people listen to what I do for a living and I hear their judgment and their questions, yes, or their tone, I find that very hurtful. And I don't know, I know I still have to work on that, but I feel like saying, no, I'm very intelligent, I'm very grounded, I'm very normal. It's like I want to say to them.
Right. And I realized that on my website that I had to, it was important to me to put that, I have a master's degree, that I have a real job, that I'm grounded, that I'm, I've lived a regular life. It almost like I had to defend myself or prove that it was. And I was talking to a woman, and I love this expression, and she said, you're grounded woo. You have this woo woo, this spiritual, but you're so grounded about it. And I love that because that's what I think that brings a normalcy to it.
Well, and I don't know if you had this experience, but when I was starting to really open up and get into this world, I was taking classes and workshops. I was driving, 3 and 4 hours, like anywhere I could get instruction. And some of the people I met were really out there. Did you have that? And I was like, this is not, these aren't my people either.
Right, because and I think for anyone who is listening to this that is trying to find their true voice or find their empathic community, there are a lot of folks in that community that are, how can I put this in a nice way? They're convinced that they're vibrating at a much higher frequency than any of the rest of us.
That's a nice way to put it. Good job.
Thank you.
See, you just earned your master's degree there. Yeah, for me, though, it was actually a very lonely time. Like when I was opening up and accepting this, it was so exciting and exhilarating. And in many respects, it was one of the happiest times of my life. But in the same energy, it was kind of very lonely, too, because my normal friends, that I taught with or that were moms, I felt that they didn't understand me. And then I finally took the leap of faith to reach out and meet people that were into this woo-woo stuff. And some of them were just, Shirley MacLaine told us to go out on a limb.
Oh, I loved her too.
Some of those people went way too out on that limb.
Yes.
So that was hard to find people that were, where you were on that page and that stage of development. So I think it's important to always, keep reading, keep studying, keep taking classes and workshops, and just setting the intention that you will meet someone who's, like you, because I think we need community and connection when we're opening up to this.
We do, and you just nailed it as far as having to live that dual life of I'm a public school teacher and these are the people and these are my children's friends and their mothers and all of this stuff, and then you're at a drumming circle or you're at a chakra balancing workshop and the two don't mesh, or it's very hard to bring those two worlds together. So then when you do start stepping more into this is just who I am, and you share little bits and pieces of both worlds with both of those, and there's still a line down the middle. I think there always will be, because it's respect. If I work with someone who has very strong religious beliefs and that they would find this offensive, obviously I'm not going to talk about it, because that's just rude and disrespectful to their belief system.
I agree. I am not in the business of convincing or proving myself to anyone.
No. And that's a huge point, because I think that's when you know you're okay, is when when you can say, it's all right, this is just the way I am, or you can walk away and not take it personally. That's a huge step.
What was it like for you? Because I would imagine that the population of children you dealt with were very emotionally draining for you.
Yes.
What was it like being an empath and working with that all day, and then coming home as a single mom to 2 young boys? Like, how did you find balance? How did you shield yourself during that time?
I didn't, which is, I think that, and I know there are so many people in this place right now, you're on autopilot. You're just kind of doing everything you can do to keep going. And it's not, I don't mean that in a negative way, because I absolutely loved raising my boys. They're wonderful. It was fun, and all that was one of the beautiful things of being a teacher. We'd have similar time off. But at one point when they were little tiny guys, and I was also teaching a 1-2 combined classroom, and I thought, oh my God, I'm spending 24 hours a day with people under 3 feet tall.
It's so true.
And then when you get in with, I've worked with really, children who are in juvenile detention or in, severe mental health issues. And that's another whole piece, because so many of them are highly sensitive. and it's a defensive thing for them with the behavioral stuff to protect themselves. So that's another whole piece of working in that area. But yes, I think for anyone who's in doing that right now, it's a hard place to be, especially to find balance.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. And I think a lot of times when people are opening up to their intuition and their empathy, they leave out the grounding, the psychic protection. And that's such an important part of this. And we're actually going to do a whole show on those different topics in a couple of weeks. So tell us about your boys. Are they psychic?
They are in their own way, and I used to joke because they're very, very different. They're very different young men. Both young men now. They're grown, and they one is very linear sequential, very mechanically oriented, thinks like an engineer. A leads to B, loves the scientific method. Math. It was a little tiny guy with no teeth, and he said, "I love math because numbers are true." So very much, and he has said to me, "I don't understand how this works because it doesn't make sense." The other son is a musician, a creative, a photographer, and more empathic, but also hasn't, and I think that's another piece for males. It's very different to step into that energy as a male versus a female, because there are female characteristics involved with that, and they're both very masculine young men. My older son will use his intuition to figure out how to fix something. He's very good at ripping stuff apart, putting it back together, figuring out a way to make things work easily, and he'll sleep on it and he'll dream about how to fix something, which I absolutely love. And I've said, you're using your intuition by doing that. It's the same thing. You're accessing that same part of your brain. The other son composes music, writes music, and that's how he expresses his intuition. So it's interesting to see how we may express it in a different way, but everyone finds a way to make that connection. And if you're paying attention to what you do easily, what brings you joy, what you love, that's usually a really good flag on this is where my intuition, the seat of my intuition is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a good point too, because just because you're intuitive doesn't mean you have to hang up a shingle and start doing readings.
No, and that's the other piece is I talk to a lot of folks. I want to do this. I want to do what you're doing. You really are, and just as a personal side, and I promise this isn't ego-based, unless you go from a place of I want to be of service, I can't imagine doing this. I can't imagine choosing to do this if it wasn't to be of service, because it's not as easy as it, and I don't want to say it's not easy because I love it incredibly. I love doing the work. But it's a commitment. It's a lifestyle. You really have to be willing to say, this is what I do, and devote yourself to it 100%.
Well, now you're out of the closet. I mean, you are still teaching, but you have a beautiful website. You're booked constantly with your readings. How have you been able to navigate these two worlds at school?
I have still kept that. There are people that I work with that know that side of me that I have actually done readings for, that I've connected with. And it's interesting that some people don't say anything, or some people just give me a funny look. But again, that goes back to, are you comfortable with who you are? And again, I don't advertise it. It's a respect thing for me, as far as that's my job and that's what I go to do. But it is... do I use my empathy and compassion in my job? Every day. Do I use my psychic skills in my job? Every day. Because that, being around teenagers, holy moly, you need to use your psychic skills.
Heck yeah. Tell me this, because I have a really hard time. So if you're a good friend of mine, I have a really hard time reading for you, period.
Right.
It's like it just doesn't even the deceased people don't tend to come through for me when it's somebody that I know really well.
Huh.
And I don't know why that is. I think it's like my fear of getting something wrong because I'm so subjective with them.
Mhm.
But I'm much better, much better, and much more comfortable reading for perfect strangers. I've had some issues with acquaintances, like coworkers type people asking me for readings because
Right.
I feel that when you sit down, when I do a reading for someone, like it gets serious really fast. You know what I mean? And like their
Yes.
guides and their people bring through some hardcore stuff from their past
Right.
that they probably, even if they were three sheets to the wind, wouldn't have told me.
Right.
And
Yeah.
here I am telling them stuff that's happened to them and validating it. And it's just sometimes it's awkward after that energy closes and then we go back to being coworkers. Like, have you found that to be true for you?
Spot on, exactly. And that was a really huge step of what had happened was I had agreed to someone doing a newspaper article. So that's when people at work really started to know that, was that you in the paper, Denise? Oh my gosh, blah, blah, blah. And nobody said anything until one of the people who worked in the school, this man came up and he said, so, is that you? And I said, what? And he said, in the paper. And he said, my daughter's that way, you know. I said, okay.
That way.
And but it opened the door, and then people said, oh, it's this you. And that's the really cool part is no matter where you are, there are people like you. And they start to, they're one of the secretaries, one of the custodial ladies, an ed tech, a teacher, and you just kind of gravitate and you find each other, and it's this little oasis in the storm as far as you have that bond and that connection. But you're exactly right, is when you have seen someone at their most vulnerable, when you bring through a deceased family member and validate that, and then you're passing someone in a hallway and saying, oh, hi, how are you today? It changes the dynamics incredibly.
Yeah, it really does. And I think that, it's something to think about because, and, we'll talk about this on later shows, but when I was first recognizing that I could do this, I was like a kid in a candy store.
Oh,
And
me too.
so if I was in line behind you at Target, guess what? I was going to talk to your dead grandma. And, and if you were my waitress, I was going to bring through your boyfriend who died in the car accident 3 years ago. I
Hmm.
mean, I was just, and I don't, and like I said, I think we need to talk about the ethics of that at a later time because I don't really agree with that old Samantha who did that. But when you get so excited, it's like you can't keep it in. It's like, oh my gosh, this is real, and I'm doing this, and yet, with coworkers that you have to see all the time, it can be awkward.
It can, and it can make people uncomfortable. And it's um, what really, what really changed that for me, because I did the same thing, and I was with a group of people I hadn't known, and it was so exciting, and I loved it, and I wanted to help. I wanted to let them know, yes, your mother is standing there watching you sing. But when I heard someone say, would you go and peek in someone's windows and watch what they were doing? And I said, oh my God, I'd never do that. And they said, don't you think that's the same thing when you do that and you're looking in someone's psychic window without their permission? So I just stopped doing it. It's like, oh my gosh, I would never ambush someone with that anymore because it's not my business.
No, no, it's not, and that's something. Again, we'll cover that on another show. But that's why I always say that doing a reading is like a three-way phone call, and I need
Hmm.
everybody to pick up an extension. I have to pick up a
That's
line.
good.
I need the client to pick up a line, and I need the loved one in heaven to pick up a line. And unless I have all three picking up an extension, I don't feel it's right to, bring that message through. That's why I also don't like it when people come to me and they say, I am here to connect with my Uncle Larry. I don't
I
like that either because you know what? Your Uncle Larry might not want to talk to you today, but your Grandma Susie is right here and she can't wait to say hello.
Or to discount what you're saying because you don't bring through the one specific thing they want to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember I did a reading once and she was insistent that she wanted to hear from one of her relatives. I can't remember which one. And a school teacher that had actually paid for a semester of her college. No, that's not true. Had paid for one of her summer classes.
Right.
Came through just to say like hello and like what she meant to him as a student, and it was just very moving. And she was like, I could have sat here all day and I never would have thought he's the one that would have shown up. So I think it's so important to, be open when you do go to see a medium and not demand or insist on who you see. But
Right.
anyway, I'm kind of getting off topic and I know we need to wrap up. Um, but so now you're fully out of the closet and you're kind of surfing these two worlds, the normal teacher world and then the woo-woo world of doing mediumship. Do you feel that you're balancing it well and learning to, ground and protect yourself at both ends?
Yes. Yes, because I'm sorry about the dog in the background. She's having a good
That's
time.
okay. Everybody say hi to Grace.
Hi, Grace. She. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. It is, and it's also though I do. This is summer, so I'm full time medium. I'm full time psychic. My business is 6 or 7 days a week, and I'm very immersed in it. And then when I go back to school in a few weeks, I'll do. You have to balance both.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's another whole. But I do use the protection in both places. Yes.
Well, I did that for quite a long time where I taught and did readings. And there were many times where teaching was a relief to me. Like I needed the teaching to I grounded myself in the classroom.
Right.
Because at night I was doing readings and I was bringing through, children for parents and just really heavy emotional stuff that was very difficult for me to carry. And it was kind of a relief to wake up in the morning and go into the classroom where I felt very safe and comfortable.
And it's also that practical side of you still have a mortgage, you still have the electric bill, your kids still need shoes. You have to have if you're not generating the income you need from your business or as with a spiritually based business, I think that's another whole piece. Is it's a very rare gift for someone to be able to just start right out as a full-time spiritual business without having to balance it between two things for a while.
Right. And that can be very, very tricky as well.
Yes.
But I think that you're doing it beautifully.
Thank you.
So if people wanted to find out more about you, where's the best place for them to go to?
I would say the website, which is thegratefulmessenger.com. That's also on Facebook, The Grateful Messenger. Either way is a good way to get in touch with me. Yes.
Okay, great. Yes, and Denise and I are talking about joining the world of Twitter.
a little bit of a learning curve, but we'll get this.
Yeah, we're not real sure about it yet. We hear there's a couple of people on there, but right now we're on Facebook and I've joined Instagram, and hopefully you will too soon. Well, thank you so much for answering all my questions, Denise. A lot of that I didn't know myself, and I just find it fascinating. And I always love your authenticity and your honesty whenever you talk about your journey, and I really appreciate you being vulnerable enough to share all of that with us.
Well, thank you. And I'm really, really looking forward to the next show when I get to turn this around and ask you questions so that everyone can get to know your journey as well.
Well, thanks. I look forward to it too. So thanks so much, everybody, for listening to us. You are listening to Enlightened Empaths, and we hope that as you listen to this show, you realize that you too are an enlightened empath doing the work of a true light worker. I hope you all have a great week, and please tune in to us next week.
Yes, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.